What's going on, guys? I hope you guys are well and warm. Kicking it fly today, baby, because I would like to have a discussion with you in regards to something that I find remarkably difficult. It seems that whenever I start my garden, I tend to run into some of the same issues, and I want to hash it out right here. What is the hardest part of vegging your plants? Before I get started, what do you think is the hardest part to vegging your plants? For me, the whole process can be difficult, requiring patience, vigilance, good observation. However, there's something that speaks out to me a little bit more than the rest of the process, and I'm going to dive into that. But before I do, a huge shout out to Seedsman. Why? Because genetics. And if you're looking for some, use promo code PIGEONS420 and save a few dollars off at checkout. Guys, hardest part of vegging your plants, going to jump right into it. It is the germination stage. Not just the moment while you're trying to expose the taproot, but also just that few days after the taproot's exposed and you've got a little bit of green life above the dirt. As soon as you've got a little bit of green life above the dirt, this is where things get a little bit difficult. I always tell people that you can't drown a seed. Why? Well, because you can actually drop a seed into a shot glass of water for a few days and see if it's going to float before you even put it into paper towel, and it's going to be fine. The same thing can be applied to when you pop that bean into the soil or into your medium. It's not going to drown. Now, I caveat that very quickly with, as soon as that taproot is exposed at the bottom of the bean, that's when you need to dial back your watering. Now you can overwater. You can drown that taproot. So you want to be very, very careful. I only water with like a shot glass or even like a little mister when it's so young so that I can avoid knocking it over or I can avoid displacing the seed. Sometimes we water, the water bubbles up the medium, and that seed kind of bounces around in that little bubble of water, and then it sets down. Sometimes it can set down sideways, upside down, so on and so forth. So you want to be very careful. Now, proceeding from the germination into the first couple days / week of the seedling stage is the most important and one of the hardest. The bean is the most fragile right now. Don't transplant it. Don't increase the light. Don't take it outside. Don't change anything. If you got that taproot exposed from the beginning, you're doing just fine. Keep that method. If you start to change anything, that's when that change of atmosphere or environment is going to be pretty dramatic and deadly to that genetic, to that bean. So don't change anything. Rule of thumb for me is that when I am going to transplant, upplant, or move, I wait until the third node. I generally don't even do any training to a bean before I see some nodes. That's 2 or 3 intersects of plant life, stems coming out the side. Those are your nodes. Make sure she's high enough. That way you know she's going to be able to take the abuse that you give her. Now, of course, the germination in the couple weeks of, or the first few days of veg are very important. And they're the hardest, but because they're the most fragile. But why is it so difficult to continue past the germination or the seedling stage? I honestly believe it's patience. I feel that people don't give the bean enough time to grow. Listening to a conversation yesterday, I heard people say, yeah, I waited 3 to 5 days and I haven't seen anything pop up yet. That's not long enough. In perfect conditions, 3 to 5 days is perfect for a seedling to germinate. However, sometimes it can take upwards of 7 to 10, sometimes even 12 days to germinate. Now, generally, there's a reason for that. Maybe it's too dry, maybe it's too wet, maybe it's too hot. These kind of things will have an impact on the germination of that bean. So if you don't have the environment just perfect, you might be waiting a little bit longer to see that bean germinate and to see that bean come up out of the dirt. Now, just a little tidbit of advice. If you do see yourself getting through the seedling stage and you've got this little plant sticking above the medium and it's not going anywhere, you've stunted it. This is actually quite common, but it's not the end of the world. I would highly recommend you take a quarter dose of your veg nutrients. This, of course, works best for synthetic, and add it to that seedling. I know rule of thumb is that you don't want to feed a seedling because that seedling is a self-contained package of life. It's going to do just fine. But if it doesn't, it needs a little bit of encouragement, and that quarter dose of nutrients after a stunt is going to do it wonderfully. I wanted to have this conversation because I think getting started on the right foot can be quite difficult. But with a little bit of insight, a little bit of information, you can do it, and you're going to do it wonderfully. I want to ask you again, what do you think is the hardest part of vegging your plant? I want to hear from you. I'm sure we're going to have some different answers. Huge shout out to Seedsman. Thank you for bringing us today's episode. We will see you in the next one. Peace.